This is a real-life example of a cabinet under a sloped ceiling. It is a user's question about how to create a similar structure using tools from my FreeCAD add-on. Note there are irregular fronts and pull-out hole cabines with shelves. Additionally, the whole thing is on wheels, and there's likely some kind of electric mechanism to help move such heavy cabinets. I'm concerned about the floor scratching, which could certainly become visible after some time, and easy access to shelves. Nevertheless, I'll show you how to design something like this quickly. Designing the entire structure may seem very difficult. However, it turns out to be very simple and quick with the right approach. The entire main structure can be created in 15 minutes. If you want to get more detailed model, it can take a little more, but rather less than an hour. Before starting the design, it's best to set the appropriate board thickness and colors in the Magic Settings tool. It's best to start designing the main structure by creating a platform on which the walls will be designed. In this case, the fastest way is to use the workspace platform from the Magic Start tool, which immediately sets the transparency of such a platform, making it easier to see the designed elements. The side walls can be created in many ways. You can also use a whole cabinet from the Magic Start tool and then modify it slightly. However, I'll show you how to design such a structure completely from scratch. For copying and arranging elements, it's best to use the Magic Move tool, which allows you not only to simply move elements, but also to copy them with the appropriate spacing and relative to other. Irregular shapes filling the upper sections of the shelf can be easily created using the Magic Manager tool using the vertex-based panel creation option. In this case, simply select edges or faces near a given vertex, and the Magic Manager tool will automatically set the nearest vertex as the next vertex to create a panel. To create such shapes at the back side, simply clone all the panels created this way relative to the side wall. Back walls can be created using the Magic Start tool. However, remember to zero set the appropriate edges so that the panels don't overlap. There are many schools of thought and everyone probably has their own methods for creating the back panel. Personally, I usually use full chipboard of 18 mm thickness, but inside, which adds stiffness and strength to the entire structure after the sides are screwed in. Then to create subsequent modules, simply clone them with zero spacing in the y-coordinate axis. However, remember to place the entire module within a link group container. The fastest way to create fronts is to use the Magic Manager tool and the option to create panels using selected vertices. If there are any differences between modules, as in this case with the fronts, it is sufficient to create the fronts that are only for the first module outside the containers. If necessary, you can later slightly move them using the Magic Move tool to leave space for the hinges. Much depends on the availability of hinges and the spacing tested in practice. In Poland, after tightening all the screws, the typical domino hinges center themselves in the center of the furniture gap for front, leaving a 9 mm overlap on both sides. These are the cheapest hinges in DIY stores, but they have a soft close mechanism and have been in my kitchen for 2 years without any problems. Furthermore, they have the ability to detach the fronts, which isn't always standard with hinges, but for me this is very important because it simplifies any potential front replacement or even installation. The only drawback of these hinges is their limited adjustability, but once you've thoroughly tested the spacing in practice, you'll have no problems during assembly. As you can see, the design seems very difficult to design, but it's actually very quick to create. Even with such a non-standard structure, you can create various views that imitate drawer movement or open fronts or sliding modules. In this case, first open the Magic View tool to save the default initial position of all elements. Then you can freely move containers to achieve the desired look while saving the views. This allows you to easily and quickly change the position of all elements and even quickly create documentation for someone else to complete the project. The side walls of such a cabinet under a sloping ceiling can also be constructed with greater precision in terms of height and ceiling spacing. Since a sloping wall doesn't have an anchor point in the middle to extend the panel, you can do a little trick. First, simply create the walls along the bottom edge. Then simply extend the panels to the bottom surface. This way, after changing the position of the top surface, you'll achieve perfect side wall dimensions and a perfectly different ceiling spacing. If you want greater precision in creating fronts and their parameterization, simply use the Add External tool. This tool will create a new structure with a sketch and references to selected faces. Simply edit the sketch and draw the front. Construction lines can also be used if there's no way to anchor the front shape in a given location. After drawing the front in the sketch, simply click the Sketch to Pad tool to create the front with the appropriate thickness and color set in the Magic Settings tool. This allows you to create irregular shapes very quickly and with great precision. By default, fronts can be opened using the magic angle tool by simply rotating the element around the Z coordinate axis. However, I've also added an additional tool called Fronts, Open Close, dedicated to opening and closing fronts. The tool searches for all simple panels whose system name begins with front and opens them to the left. You can also select the right edges to override the automatic opening of fronts by setting attributes for a given front. These attributes can also be manually changed. In this case, the front was created in a sketch, and its name does not begin with front. Therefore, you can place the entire front into a container and set attributes for the entire link group container. By first selecting the link group container and then selecting the edges of the pad object within it. This will cause the entire container to rotate around the selected coordinate axis, which also allows you to add other elements to the container such as front handles or decorations. If you're creating walls under a sloped ceiling over a long distance, it's probably best to avoid measuring the angle of the top surface. Angular measurements are imprecise, and at large distances it's unlikely you'll actually be able to achieve the precision necessary to perfectly align the other side. If you want your project to be a reality, it's best to measure edges and lengths. In this case, the angles will be based on the lengths of the elements, and they will be created automatically when the elements are joined. A protractor is only useful for very small distances and equal angles, or for measuring on a piece of paper in school. However, in real life over large distances, it's better to completely forget about measuring angles and relying on them when assembling elements or designing.